talk about breasts.
Let's talk about you and me.
Let's talk about all the good things
and all the bad things. So, welcome to yet another episode of Boo 2. Here we are on episode 20. And y'all probably didn't think we had 20 topics dealing with breasts, but we do. And there's more where it came from. Got a lot to get off our chest here. So, thanks for joining. It's your best friend, Jaleesa. And we also have
Chantel here.
Yes, and we're here to bring you some more breast topics, okay? While keeping breast abreast. So, would you like to tell us what we're going to be talking about today for episode 20?
20. I think that's a magic number almost, but close to 20. Never mind.
It's a magic number.
Yeah. Making them almost like that grown up when you like 21. Anyway, we getting there. All right, but lastly we talked about breast friends. Mm-hmm. And you may be a breast friend or you know a breast friend. And as this is coming, as August is National Breastfeeding Month, this is a great opportunity to learn some new information about breastfeeding if you are a breastfeeding breast friend or you know one. So we do have a special guest joining us later in this episode. Before we get to that, we want to talk about some things. You know, the first thing we go into is
we gotta take these boobs to the street.
There we go.
BoobTube on the move. Let's see what we have for today's episode.
I think there are certain things women should adhere to when they're in public, and this is regarding breastfeeding. If they're in public, they need to pump or breastfeeding.
No.
What are your thoughts on breastfeeding in public?
I don't have a problem with it because I had breastfeeding in public. I feel like if you can eat in public, your babies can be fed in public. But I also think that you should have some amount of, cover up with it. But that's not always available. So when a child is home, you can't deny a child his or her meal because you're in public.
Did you meet a mother? Did you breastfeed?
I did.
Okay, and did you use nursing bras or did you just use a regular bra?
I did. I used a nursing bra.
Okay. And what are your thoughts about breastfeeding in public?
I support it. I'm all for women empowerment. I mean, you have to do what you have to do to supply nutrition for your children, your child, no matter where you are.
Do you think there's any things that women should adhere to when it comes to needing to breastfeed or pump and they're not?
In this society, in this day and age, I feel like you always have to be cognizant and aware of your location. So it's important to have those proper tools and accessories with you because you never know who's lurking, and you always want to be safe. But as far as like rules and regulations that go back to you have to do what you have to do as a mother. I don't think that breastfeeding in public or at work, I don't think any of that should be relevant.
Do you think there are certain things that women should adhere to when breastfeeding or pumping and they're not?
No, I don't think so. Maybe a blanket, that's it. My mom used to throw a blanket over herself. Yeah. It's very natural. So, I think just a general maybe throw a blanket over the baby, all that square. That's what my mom did. So that's what I would do.
Do you have any thoughts overall for healthy breastfeeding?
I think it should be allowed. I'm not against it. It's a maternal thing. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's for that baby, eat it for that bitch. So, little blanket, call it square, I think that's it.
Do you think there are certain things women should adhere to when they're in public and need to breastfeed or pump?
Honestly, as long as I feel like you're covered up, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, if someone's reading too much into it, that's their problem. It's a natural thing for a woman to breastfeed. I don't know how many months it is. But if a lady is on the bench over there sitting down and she's breastfeeding, if you sitting like this, that's a you problem. It's not bothering nobody. Now, if you tend to just act, then we make bad talk about something.
Like with no baby on it.
Yeah, if it's not with no baby, yeah, we gotta talk about that, man.
Got it.
Or if the baby run away and you don't whip the titty back in, then we might have to do something. I understand a couple seconds, but if it's like it's out there for a couple seconds, yeah, we gotta talk about that.
You're a mother. Did you breastfeed your children?
I did both.
Okay. And do you use a nurse? Or did you use a regular bra? When
oldest, I did do a nursing block. With the baby girl, she just got what she got. So I did do a nursing block, but I didn't spend a lot of money on it. Because I was a second time mama and you just don't spend unnecessary money.
Right.
Exactly.
I get it. I understand. Now, were you breastfed? A lot of us were not back in the day. Right.
Yeah.
That's why we're saying milk now. What do you think about breastfeeding in public? What are your thoughts?
I am here for it. I don't think we might be names for it in public because it's national. I support it.
Never be ashamed.
Never be ashamed.
So it seems like it was a pretty general consensus with everyone we talked to on the streets that breastfeeding is something natural. Shouldn't be any sort of rules, regulations, stipulations,
No
limitations.
shame brought up on it. I'm glad to hear that. You know, I'm glad that people are seeing the benefits and how common breastfeeding can and should always be.
Right. Men included. Like no one's thinking of it like, oh, they should have to put a cloth on them or something. I mean, I know one did talk about, you know, what he did see his mom do or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it's still regular and normal. So nothing crazy there.
Progress, because I think like even maybe, well, I don't know, 20 years ago, I don't want to think about that, so I don't know. But
Of course
but I do know, like from talking to different family members, like at one point breastfeeding was not a popular thing to do.
Right.
So it's good to know that something natural is coming back and that people are not afraid of it or intimidated by it, I should say.
It's crazy the effects of society or whatever, and how that could change things. Because we have like whole generations to where breastfeeding wasn't common.
No.
And being formula fed was more common.
It's more convenient too.
Right.
Was it though? I would think breastfeeding would be more convenient actually, so.
It kind of makes me think about like us Black women or girls and the relaxers.
Oh, don't take it back to that.
I know, right? But it's just like, how did we get to a point to where we were like convinced or believed like, we shouldn't do that anymore? Like, breastfeeding is something that had been happening since the beginning of time. There's no way around that.
Yeah, you had to do it because there was no formula.
Right. So this is like, how do we get to a point to where you're like generations of not breastfeeding? At least a whole generation.
I think when you have the option to not do something, that started playing into people, and you're like, well, if I don't have to do it, I ain't gonna do it. And that's what happened. A lot of people didn't do it.
Right.
But then we and then also I think too with research and science and everything that plays a part into us knowing and being more informed about the benefits of breast milk versus way back then when you had to do it, you just thought you had to do it. But now that you understand the benefits of it, you're like, oh, okay, I want to do this.
Right. It's crazy. It's like the most natural thing on earth. Well, like for humanity, I would say. Not on earth.
We got literally some men in bodybuilding drink breast milk.
Really?
Yeah, my brother told me about this because he was with one of my kids. He was like, you should sell it. I'm like, I know you can do that for kids. He was like, no, it'd be some men who in bodybuilding, they will drink breast milk. I don't know. I forget what it does, but it just one of those things. I'm like, that's weird right now, but it does something for.
I guess. I wonder what the science behind it is. I assume there's some sort of science behind it, but I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why Dave Chappelle was asking for the Cambodian breast milk.
Specifically, Cambodia.
Right. Yeah, specifically Cambodian breast milk. But I don't know. Maybe there was more to that we didn't really know.
We'll dive into that.
We're just laughing at Cambodian breast milk, not knowing
what it is.
Right. Maybe it's to make him swole or something. Who knows?
Yes.
Nah, I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's something I never heard of.
Yeah.
But I mean, we are mammals or beings that drink the milk of other animals.
Cows.
Yeah. It's kind of backwards because like no one else is doing
and they don't share their milk.
Right.
Oh no, don't cats drink like cow milk? Do people get their cats cow milk?
I think they do, but they naturally they would drink from their mom, which is their breast milk.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of we're backwards.
We are
as a race. There's a lot that we have to get. A lot of kinks we got to work out here. But breastfeeding is one of them that we're progressing in with time.
Yeah.
So with that, there's more information and resources. So yeah, hopefully we continue to see that. I like natural things, so hopefully we continue to see that.
Yeah, that's
from
right.
Up and up.
It's great benefits, which we'll get to throughout this episode today. All right, so we talked about breastfeeding not being so taboo anymore. Let's jump into some specific topics. Let's talk about lactation.
Well, you're the only mother here.
You're
right. You can dive in on that.
Well, yeah, usually it is when women begin, after they give birth is when the breasts fill up with milk. And so I remember even like with my first child, like there is some, I'm gonna forget these terms right now. Mama brain is kicking in along with some other stuff, but it's not the real breast milk that comes out. There's it's a clear liquid that still has the benefits and protein that the baby needs before the milk actually comes in. So it takes about 2 or 3 days, I believe, for the milk to come in. And when you come in,
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name either.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking
look
about.
it up real quick because I don't want to.
Go ahead.
What is it? A myth before the milk. That's not what it's.
The clear liquid before the milk, I guess.
But while
we're just gonna be like, that's what it's.
And I want to say it starts with the M, but I can't. Can really milk before the milk. Really attest to that for the milk. Let's see what that is. Colostrum. Way off. A nutrient-rich pre-milk.
Right.
Yep. Colostrum. So that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember that. So yeah, lactation is a real thing that mammals, again, that was one of our first Boots Gonna Move questions we had. So all mammals lactate. Fortunately for us, we could put some pads and bras on or something so we're just not lactating all over the place.
Right. Let's just be dripping.
Yeah. But another word that I recently learned about was prolactin. And that is if you apparently have not experienced pregnancy, but you can still lactate. Yeah.
So I had touched on that in episode 8, Everything in Cancer, where we spoke with Dr. Gabby. Because that was something I experienced. So prolactin is your hormone produced by the pituitary gland. And we all have it, but there are times where it can be, you could not produce a lot or you can produce a lot. That hormone is usually elevated in women who are pregnant and or nursing, lactating. And so what I had experienced was having that hormone elevated without having a pregnancy or any nursing going on. And then that, as you can see, it has lact in it. So that could bring about lactation itself. And that could happen when you're not pregnant, like what happened with me.
Yeah.
But so.
Question. Did you feel like anything or would it just happen?
No. You talking about how you felt like when that milk came or something?
Yeah.
No. I didn't feel any pains or anything like that because I think with that, if I'm not mistaken, because like your child has already started to be on your nipple and you produce like what your child needs. So I feel like that sudden urge or rush, whatever you feel, is like a not mass production, but like this big production of like what your baby needs.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. I was just starting to produce
some
milk. So maybe that's why I didn't feel like that big rush, like, oh, here it goes. Yeah. Because there was no actual baby. All I would feel is just like a drop, like if it was a little drop at the nipple, then I could feel the air hit it.
Yeah.
It was like, something's there.
I have that too because I think like over the past couple of years, every so often I'll feel like there is, like I'm lactating. Like it's weird. Like, and And I'm like, what is going on? But nothing comes out, but there's this feeling that something's going on in there.
It could be. I know that because during that process, I went to see a holistic doctor, and before I did, I asked her like, "Hey, do you work with this? Have you experienced this, whatever?" And I know that she did mention having a client who had started lactating, and she had the last time she had a kid was like 15 years ago or something. Right. So I don't know if hers was just like, I don't know if it was specifically like elevated prolactin. Well, I imagine it had to be elevated, but I don't know like what she had going on to cause that. So,
something to keep in mind. And
stranger things.
Yeah. So you're lactating, perhaps as a nursing mother, and perhaps you don't want to lactate anymore. So there are ways that you can drop your milk. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of anything before?
Just cabbage. That's the old remedy I've heard. Okay. And then I read in my journey, I had also did some research that like a chasteberry tree that helps. Well, the chasteberry itself that helps with your prolactin levels and your lactation and stuff. So like, and I did take some of it. Like you can buy like the powder, or you could grow the tree and do whatever with the berries. But what I noticed is like, cause I read on it and saw like they had some research on it. So like if you take a little, it could kind of cause you to produce more. Mm-hmm. But if you take like double the dosage or something like that, then it can help to bring it back down.
Okay.
So that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I didn't take anything. I just let it dry up on its own naturally. But I know there are certain medications you need to avoid if you're wanting to continue to produce. And there see my mind, it's just leaving me.
The medication?
There's medication, but there's also other things like foods to avoid too. Because there are certain foods that help you produce more, like oatmeal, that does help you produce more, like if you're wanting to like pump or just have milk in general. But there are certain foods that would dry up your milk as well.
I'm gonna give it a second to think about it.
I want to, but I might just have to go to Google again because my mind is not working today. And oils as well, but hold on.
Yeah, make sure you project.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, real quickly, Google said anti-prolactin drugs do that. So that's all right. Let's see. Where are we? Foods that will dry up breast milk. Yeah, come on now, give specifics. I don't think it's garlic. People eat garlic. That's what you eat but it can go. There's foods that you can eat that go into your bloodstream that babies may not like. And garlic and onion was one, cabbage too. And that also makes babies have bad parts too.
Cabbage?
Yeah.
You eat cabbage?
Yeah.
And you breastfeed?
Yeah. All right.
It's funny how that works. Then it dries up the milk too.
Sage, that's an oil, but an herb too, but stay away from sage. Yes, that's one of them, but there are some other things, like they say caffeine and excess vitamin C and B can also help with low milk production, but sage was the one I was thinking of that would dry up milk. So if you're wanting to, you would do those things, use sage.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So eat some sage to dry up the milk?
Yep.
Okay.
Or take the oil. I think they have it in oil form too.
Probably so.
Yeah.
What about leaking? Did you experience that?
Yeah. I mean, I had the nursing pads too, so that definitely comes in handy. But yeah, you're gonna leak when especially if you're if you return back to work and your baby's not around, or your body's used to a certain time that your baby should be feeding, and maybe their season schedule has changed and it's time to feed, but they're not ready to. You will leak, especially when your breasts get full. Mm-hmm. You know that, and you feel that coming on, but sometimes you don't even feel when you're leaking. It just happens.
Right. I remember a college professor saying that like she thought she was ready to go back to work and stuff, and was pushing forward, and then like day one she had like leaked through her shirt and stuff. And it was like, oh crap.
She didn't have the pads.
I
Obviously
guess
not if you leak through the shirt. But even if you don't have the pads, like there were like I think I would have put napkins. I always usually have pads, but if I ran out, put the napkins in there too, just in case. So let's move on to the benefits for the mama who breastfeeds.
Alrighty.
One of the biggest ones is being able to lose weight a lot quicker. You use that baby fat for whatever reason. Nursing helps the woman lose weight quickly. So you can quickly get back to your pre-baby size or even smaller. So that is a great benefit that a lot of women will attest to.
Yeah, I hear about that happening.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty common.
Yeah.
Sometimes they said like they make jokes about women who breastfeed for like many years.
They ain't got nothing to do with lace spot.
They say that they're doing it like to keep their weight in check.
They ain't got nothing to do with losing weight.
I'm just saying what I heard.
That's just part of that attachment thing with the mom and the kid at that point.
Which is a thing.
Yeah.
The baby bonding with the attachment, skin to skin contact, all that.
Because I mean, you're not producing that much at a toddler. You're not producing that much milk anymore as they get older. So you are that size.
Pumping.
Oh, that's a lot. Ooh, carrying that much weight, milk for that long. I couldn't imagine. Not this mama. Nope.
What about? Oh, some women like the fuller breasts when they're breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit.
That is, if they stay too.
Right. If they stay.
Because sometimes they don't and they go back. Sometimes you lose a lot more than what you started with. For some, that can happen.
I heard about that too.
Yeah, I have a friend. She was like, "Oh, I'm so happy I have breasts now." And then after she's done nursing, her breasts go away. So she's excited for that. But if you're already big and you continue to get bigger, you might not like it. So that's just something to keep in mind. Bigger the breast when you're breastfeeding depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. Then there's like my friend who said titties are ghetto.
Yeah.
While she's breastfeeding.
I can see why she said that.
So she's definitely not enjoying the larger.
I was huge, huge when I was nursing. Oh my goodness, so huge.
I saw it with my friend who's probably like a B cup or something, and she had a baby, and her breasts were like mine.
Oh, good. That's a big jump too.
Yeah,
and big adjustment.
Looking at her breast, I was like, yeah, dang, the body does some amazing things.
The stretch ability. It's like a superhuman, like superhero.
Where does the skin come from?
That's a question right there, from B to G right there, for real.
Yeah. Nah, I think she went from like B to J. It was a lot. I was like, you know, like those cartoons where they had those eyes bulging. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a real thing. And I remember having to run off in a sprint, no sports bra, no, just a regular bra, and they were huge, to go chase one of my other young one that was just running around. So that was painful.
Dang.
Literally jugs.
Definitely not a benefit with that, the pain that comes with it.
Yeah.
Hopefully
you ain't gonna be running with him with no like literal jugs of milk.
Right.
Hopefully you ain't gonna do that, but they do get big, but then they go back down again. And again, you can probably lose more than what you started with. So that's something to keep in mind. But it can be a yay or a nay for some women.
Right. Then what about some of the barriers or that could come with breastfeeding?
The biggest one that I can think of personally for myself was latching.
Mm-hmm.
If the baby doesn't latch, and if they don't latch correctly, that can be very painful because that nipple is very sensitive at that time. Even just think about it now, I remember like, oh my goodness. Because I think at some point in the beginning, it hurts more, but then there's a threshold you get over where it doesn't hurt anymore. But it can be painful, but so that latching is very important. And then if you don't produce, if you're not producing enough for your baby to thrive, then that's a barrier as well.
You're right.
Think of what else. I think for some women, if they feel embarrassed by breastfeeding, I know we said like even with the boob tube segment that it's not no longer taboo, but I think with breasts being over sexualized in the U.S., that can be a thing for women to keep women from.
You're right.
From breastfeeding.
Because they're definitely looking at them as more sexual things instead of being here to create life.
Yeah.
Well, keep life going once it's created,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Nourishing a child.
Yeah.
So yeah. And that has its own, I mean, we talked about it being here in the US, but there are obviously cultural differences here in the US and
Yeah.
then thinking about it outside of the US too, because a lot of other places is way more common to just breastfeed the kid wherever you're at.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even have to have like a cloth or anything over it. It just is what it is. And then here it's more so like you need to be modest with it and like, oh my gosh, like
which strikes me as very confusing or hypocritical. Like, isn't like the U.S. the capital like porn nation and stuff?
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised.
But so you could have that, but you don't want a mother nursing her child like out in the open.
No, that would just be too much.
Too much.
Can't be showing the titty for free.
The baby can't be. It needs to be an adult male or whatever. So
I guess like let these women
feed their babies.
Right, that's what
in
we
peace.
do.
Feed the babies.
Animals do it. You see animals doing it all the time. It's normal. You don't be like, oh, let me give this animal a little modesty cloth,
cover you up.
Yeah,
you and your litter.
Like, why are you feeding? I know you're not finna just feed your cats, your little kittens in front of all of us. Lucille. I don't know. It seems like a cat name.
Girl, I know people so that just ain't no cat name.
It sounds like the name of a sassy mama cat in my mind at the moment, for whatever reason.
We'll roll with that.
Yeah. But yeah, the U.S. definitely has its own set of things when it comes to breastfeeding, and we have the little pods set up around the Mamava. I know that's one. There are probably some other brands or whatever companies that have some too, but I know them. I see them in the airport, and maybe some other places, but for sure in the airport. And I even see like social media posts talking about it. There's somebody that I follow that talks about it, and it's like, oh, like you don't want to eat your food in the bathroom, so like why does a baby have to eat theirs in the bathroom?
Or even pumping. I remember like I don't know, it's actually a cousin. She was saying she went back to work and she didn't continue breastfeeding because she would have to go in the bathroom and pump, and her kids are adults at this point. So this is probably 20 plus years ago, of course. And so she would just pour the milk out because she didn't want to give her baby some food from the bathroom.
Right.
And that makes sense. I don't even like if I have anything, I will not walk in my own bathroom with food in my mouth. That's just not gonna happen.
Right.
The bathroom is it serves a certain purpose.
Right. Yeah. I know everyone doesn't even think like that, but I do be mindful about like taking food or anything in the bathroom because like why?
I spit out my gum. Like,
why do you need food in the bathroom? It's kind of weird.
That's nasty, in my opinion.
Like,
do your thing, but that's nasty.
Yeah. I know people might be like, oh, it's just another room or it's clean or something. It's kind of weird, especially if it's a public bathroom too. Like, that's definitely.
Oh, I'm not even.
But yeah, so like if you don't want to sit down on a toilet or something to eat, like a woman shouldn't have to sit and feed her kid on the toilet either. It made sense to me. Like I'm here for it. Like just let's just let these things naturally happen how they are supposed to.
If I was in public, I do remember going to my car with my kid. If I didn't have a covering, or maybe I think I didn't feel comfortable even with the covering in certain places, we would just go to the car.
It works.
Yeah,
it's private.
Yeah, but hopefully we don't have to do that anymore. I will say something as I'm thinking about that. Something I learned is that when it was hot, it was easier for the milk to flow out.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then sometimes the baby could choke too. So keep that in mind. Like it's coming out really, really fast, and the baby. I was like, oh, okay. But I remember like going to the car if it was hot or something, or even just expressing milk. It was just so much easier when it was hot. So they do have heat compressions that you can put on your breast if your milk isn't flowing. And then that can help push it out as well. Showers, you definitely gonna be leaking in the shower too.
That made me think how we had mentioned talking about barriers, and we mentioned in the Everything Ain't Cancer episode the mastitis and how that's common in women who are lactating? And is it where you can have like some masses or
your milk
lumps in it?
ducts get clogged.
Yeah.
And that could be painful.
So that made me think about that where you're saying like the heat things to help make it flow out smoothly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be another barrier.
Yeah, that definitely that is a barrier.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think I didn't have to deal with that, but that is a barrier.
So you're talking about like the pain from the very tender nipples while lactating, but there were also like some sensations that were associated with breastfeeding.
Yeah, like you can feel like pins and needles for some women. So tingling feeling. You definitely, I felt that early on, and that kind of felt painful, especially if you're new. Just the feeling of the breast filling up. I'll never forget feeling it the first, or recognizing it after I ate oatmeal for the first time, and then I caught on every time I ate oatmeal. It would feel like my if you can imagine a balloon filling up with water, that's what it felt like for my breast after eating oatmeal. It's a weird sensation, but it's one nonetheless. And then also while you're feeding on one side, your other side starts to fill up, and you feel that because it's like, okay, we're getting ready now. The body is just so amazing.
Right. It is interesting.
Yeah.
Dang. It's like, dang, I can't catch a break. Just release milk from one, now the other one is getting ready for battle.
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense. That's what it does, though.
Yeah. And then I found this interesting fact that Croatia has the highest rate of breastfeeding in the entire world. And so when you're thinking about populations where people are breastfeeding, you would think that maybe more larger countries might do that. But Croatia is one of 98% of all of babies are breastfed.
That's good.
Yeah. I bet they have I have to look into this some more, but I bet they have a healthy, high rate of individuals. Because they said that's one of the benefits of breastfeeding as well, is that it boosts your immune system.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Shout out to you, Croatia.
Yeah. And I will say some of the other countries that have very high rates also include Rwanda.
Okay.
Chile.
Okay.
I'm probably going to mispronounce this. Burundi.
That's how you say it.
Okay.
Or Burundi, one of them in Africa.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
They all have rates higher than 80%.
That's good.
And you think about it, like they're using the natural resources. So that just goes to show we need to tap into our natural resources.
There's nothing better than natural.
Yeah.
Can't think of anything that would be.
No, not at all. And in some women they can't breastfeed. I will say an alternative that I did use, goat's milk is the closest thing to breast milk, to a mother's human breast milk.
No,
so
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is very interesting. So we did cover a lot when it comes to breastfeeding, but could you imagine there's more to be covered with breastfeeding? So we did speak with a special guest that has a lot of very amazing information regarding breastfeeding that we want to share with you all. So let's see how that conversation went with our breastfeeding guest. Okay, so we have a local guest here, Daniela, that is a La Leche League leader here in Houston, that will join us for today, and we're going to ask her some questions. First off, can you tell us, for some who might not know, can you tell us what La Leche is and what La Leche does and how it works?
Sure. So La Leche League was founded in 1956. It is a peer-to-peer breastfeeding support organization. And so it is comprised 100% of volunteers. We are mothers who have breastfed our own children, and we go back and we get accredited to be leaders to help guide moms along their journey. And it started just outside Chicago, and it is now worldwide in many, many countries. And so basically there's local chapters, and you can call your local chapter. There's plenty of them here in Texas. And your local leader will be happy to provide support in the form of either phone support, email support. We also have virtual and in-person meetings where you can meet other parents who are going through their own breastfeeding journeys. And it's just a really great way to learn about breastfeeding and to feel supported by your own peers.
Okay.
Sounds great. And that is made up of volunteers or mothers who have gone through the journey of breastfeeding themselves. Is that how you got into becoming a local leader, or how did that come about?
It is. Yeah. I had actually found out about La Leche League through my studies, and I just kind of filed that in the back of my mind, like, oh, one of these days, if I ever have kids, I'll look it up. And so I did, and I started going when I was pregnant, which actually was the best time to go because you're not breastfeeding yet, and you're getting to learn from all of the questions that the moms around you have. So I started going, and I just felt so supported, so welcomed, and learned so much that after my first child, I decided that I wanted to give back some of the help that I had received, and so became a leader after my second child.
Love it.
Can I ask, what were some of your main questions going into those sessions? Like, being able to learn while you were pregnant, and you were saying you learned a lot. What were some of your main questions or main takeaways from it?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of funny if I were to think about the questions I asked when I was pregnant, and then now having breastfed 3 children, it's crazy. You don't know what you don't know. So it's nice to just go and listen. In some meetings, I wouldn't say one thing and I would just listen to everybody, because my main thing was oh, do I need to eat different things or wear certain clothing when I'm breastfeeding, which now seems so trivial when there's so much that goes into breastfeeding, but those are valid and real questions too. And, we have moms that come with those questions, and that's great. That's what we all have, our learning journeys. And so, how do I know my baby's getting enough? Oh, surely breastfeeding is going to hurt, or those are some of the typical pregnancy questions that we get. We can help guide moms through.
That makes sense. I can see those being some valid questions asked by some new moms. What do you think about breastfeeding in public, as that's a big ordeal, especially here in the States?
Yeah, I think that some cultures view it more as a more taboo thing than others. I think it is the main physiologic way our babies are meant to feed. And so I think the more that we can feed in public, the more it will be perceived as that physiologic norm. And then, in the entire country, it is protected by law for you to breastfeed in public. Breastfeed or pump, both of those things are 100% allowed and protected by law. As long as you are in a location where you are legally allowed to be, you can breastfeed and you can pump. And so those legal protections are there. And so I think, some moms, I think, feel more comfortable about it than others. But, that's one of the reasons I liked going to the Leche League meetings, because it was the first, kind of venture that I would have outside of the house breastfeeding. And I felt comfortable doing it, in the that space where other moms were breastfeeding, and I could see kind of how they handled, I've got the diaper bag and I've got this, and how do I do all the moving parts? And so that was kind of a little practice run for me. And after I felt comfortable doing it there, it was if I'm at the library, if I'm at the grocery store and the baby's hungry, So, yeah, it can be a tricky thing for some people, but it definitely is protected by law. And I think the more that we can support each other, the more common it will be.
Right. That there's a law. You mentioned as long as you're legally able to be there. Are there certain places where you're that law may not apply? You're not legally able to be there?
Well, sure. If I go sneak into, some restricted area and I'm not supposed to be there.
Oh, that. Okay.
Normal. But I'm breastfeeding.
Okay.
I don't care that you're breastfeeding. You're not supposed to be here.
That's where the law does not apply.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Yeah.
I had the same question, but I was I guess she means you can't be somewhere where you have a restraining order, or you can't be somewhere you're just not allowed.
Right. Yeah. Or if you're in Target, you can go do it at anywhere in Target. But if I go try to get in their break room in the employee break room, I'm not supposed to be there.
You cannot use breastfeeding as a way to get into other areas.
Yes. No sneaking around. That's what I meant.
Got it.
Thanks for the clarity.
Yes, because I wanted to make sure I was clear on that as well. Do you think there are certain things women should adhere to when they're in public or and need to pump or breastfeed?
I think it's 100% up to the woman breastfeeding. If you feel comfortable, not using a nursing cover or whatever, that's fine. But there's there's some women that would feel very uncomfortable not using a cover. It's really up to the comfort of the person, breastfeeding.
Right. That makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
What changes have you noticed as it relates to policy about breastfeeding in public? For example, are there policies that protect a woman's right to breastfeed in public? Which, I mean, we did just talk about that, but have you seen any changes over time?
So I mean, I will say that I've been involved in the world of nursing and breastfeeding and being aware of policies for about less than a decade. So I haven't seen huge changes as far as nursing in public, because when I started breastfeeding, that was already the case where breastfeeding in public is protected by law. I have seen advances in terms of policy for breastfeeding protections in the workplace. The Pump Act just passed. And so, it's protecting more workers and allowing them time to pump at work. And so that has come a long way. I think we've got a long ways to go in terms of policy. I think the biggest thing, if I had a magic wand and could fix, would be parental leave. Because if it takes 6 to 8 weeks around for your breast milk supply to be established and for you to really kind of get the hang of what's going on. And if you have to be back at work in 2 to 3 weeks, how can we expect breastfeeding parents to continue that breastfeeding relationship for up to 2 years or longer, which is the current American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation, right? So I think we've got a long way to go, but I think that there have been some gains recently.
Yeah. And I've seen some, we talk about workplace. I've seen some, I've seen them called suites. They're breastfeeding like pods or something that women can go in. I've seen those in some public places.
Yeah, they've been popping up more in airports and different locations. So yeah, that's been cool to see.
I was going to add, in addition to the policies, have you seen any shifts or changes just in breastfeeding mothers over the past less than a decade since you've been into this?
Well, I think I have, but I don't know if it's that there's been a real shift in breastfeeding in public, or it's just that my lens has changed, because before having children, I don't know that's something I would have noticed. Which, in and of itself is kind of telling when you think about it, because it should be so natural and so common that, oh yeah, I've seen people breastfeed, instead of, I had seen maybe one of my aunts breastfeed, and that was my own experience. That's it as far as experience breastfeeding. And it should, all babies eat, right? So it should be that like we've all seen breastfeeding, people in public. So we certainly have a little bit of ways to go there, probably, in terms of being comfortable breastfeeding in public, but yeah, I think it's more like my lens having shifted, and like now when I see someone breastfeeding in public, I notice it, and and if it's appropriate, I make sure to, oh, your baby, so great that you guys are breastfeeding, or it's your baby's so cute, or make sure that they know I'm comfortable with it, so that they're more likely to continue doing that the next time they want to in public.
You mentioned like you seen maybe one of your aunts, and I noticed like when I first had my first child and I was around older women, like they did not breastfeed their kids. I think there was a generational gap, especially when formula came out, and then now we're going back maybe a couple of generations before to where we're getting back to normalizing breastfeeding again. But for so long, I didn't see it either.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and when the Leche League was founded in the late 50s, early 60s, I mean, most babies were bottle fed and were formula fed. And so I think we're just now, maybe starting the late 90s, early 2000s, starting to kind of turn around and say the science is there backing, breastfeeding being the optimal, food for a baby. And
right.
formula can be a great, supplement. And because of all of these, honestly terrible working conditions that we have in the United States with lack of parental leave, sometimes you really have to rely on that, and that's totally fine. And some people choose to formula feed for whatever reason, and the Leche League is very much supportive of whatever the family's choices are and whatever works best for that family, because every family is really going to have a very different situation and a different path, and you really can't impose certain things, right? You have to be there with the families. And so that's really the mission of La Leche League, is we're here with you. we're here to answer your questions and support your feeding choices, and just making sure that they're well informed about breastfeeding so that they can make the best choice for their family.
Perfect. What are your suggestions for mothers considering breastfeeding but have concerns, whether that be how other people view them or even just knowing where to start? I know, Leche, you can, like you said, you can come in and just listen. Would that be your first point of contact, or what? Or what are your suggestions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if it's a pregnant mother that has questions, yeah, the Leche League would be a great place to start. You know, a Leche League meeting, or just reaching out to your local Leche League leader and say, hey, I'm pregnant, I have questions, I have concerns. I would say to that breastfeeding person, breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. That's like the biggest thing we hear. And it's like, oh, I think it's supposed to. I know you just have to like toughen up your nipples and you just have to like toughen yourself up and get through it. And that's not the case. Like, Mother Nature would not make something that is so imperative for our survival as a species be so painful and horrible. It doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be pleasant, or, you know, at least not hurting. It's supposed to be doable. And so definitely have your support in place before you give birth. So where are you giving birth? Most places have breastfeeding education classes, prenatal appointments, that kind of thing, so you can familiarize yourself with breastfeeding before you start, right? So I often tell moms, you know, when you first started driving a car, you didn't just get in the car. You had seen many people driving the cars before, right? You kind of already knew what to expect. You probably took driver's ed. You probably had practice hours. And so when we breastfeed, if we're like, well, we'll see how it goes, many times those are the moms that aren't able to meet their breastfeeding goals because they didn't have the support and the information that they needed, right? So let's set ourselves up for success. Reaching out to the Leche League is great. There's also Breastfeeding USA is another organization that does great work. Like I said, reaching out to your OB or your hospital and making sure that you have a breastfeeding class. If you have insurance that covers a lactation consultant, this would be an international board certified lactation consultant. Many insurances now, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, cover up to 6 visits with the lactation consultant. They can do a prenatal visit with you, go over your concerns and kind of get you a plan so that you're on a good road to success. So I would say reach out to your insurance, see if that's covered. And if not, there's a lot of free help out there. There are several lactation centers in Texas, in Houston, the Lactation Foundation, the Women's Place, I think it's called, in Dallas. I'm blanking out on the names of like the main centers, like in San Antonio and Brownsville area, but there are state funded lactation consultant agencies that hold breastfeeding classes, prenatal meetings with a lactation consultant that are covered. So if you're a member of WIC, if you're receiving WIC benefits, that would be all covered as well. So just really making sure that you have a support plan backing you up before you go into it, and just seeing like, well, let's just see how it goes.
That's some good information.
It really is.
Yeah, I would have never known. So I'm glad that you're providing that information. I did have another question, and we're talking about new breastfeeding mothers. And you mentioned earlier that it is currently recommended to breastfeed for 2 years or more. And is there like a particular reason why they say 2 years or more is best?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. So this was a recent change in policy. It used to be 1 year, but the reason that it got changed to 2 years is because it was the only agency of worldwide health that hadn't really recognized the 2 years. Like, for example, the World Health Organization has always recommended 2 years. And that is because of the enormous health benefits of breast milk, and the immune benefits and nutritional, the bonding between the mother and the baby. Formula fed babies are at greater risk for obesity, for SIDS. Mothers who formula feed are at higher risk for diabetes, for heart disease, for ovarian cancers. So it's for the health and well-being of the dyad, of the mother and the baby. And so I think a lot of times when moms hear that, they think, oh my gosh, like 2 whole years of like being attached to the baby. But But I think it goes back to the breastfeeding in public thing. I think like once babies get a little bit older, they don't need to be breastfeeding constantly. That's really just the newborn stage where you're just every couple hours that baby is eating through the night, right? And that does not happen, because I think if it did through 2 years, I don't think many of us would have more than one child. But yeah, it spaces out for sure, and it still has multiple benefits for the baby and for the mom. And so for optimal health, that's why the recommendation is 2 years or more, depending on the mother and the baby. Some anthropologic studies kind of estimate that a natural time for babies and children to wean from breastfeeding is anywhere from 2.5 to 7 years. And they've looked at kind of a lot of different data from other mammals and then also from our own human history. And it tends to be like the age kind of goes up, like during droughts and famines where food's not as plentiful, then babies and children are going to breastfeed longer. But generally speaking, babies are not going to wean themselves before 1. And a more natural time for that to happen is around 2.5 or 3.
You said generally, but my daughter, she'll be 6, but 8 months, she pushed me away. And I'm like, what is up with this child? But she was done with me at 8 months. So, but generally is the key word there.
Yeah. And, and I would say, because babies, if you're thinking about it, anthropologically, like babies before formula, we didn't have the backup of that. So if at 8 months they're weaning, what's going on? So if you had called me as a Leche League leader and said that, we could have talked a little bit about what's going on. I might have referred you to a lactation consultant to really dig deep, because, of course, at 8 months, you guys probably switched to formula. She's probably growing great. No big deal. If you wanted to continue breastfeeding, that would have been kind of an instance where, as a Leche League leader, I might have given you a few tips to see if she's having a nursing strike, is what we call it, or if something's going on. And I would have referred you on to someone who's a little more qualified than me to see, is something going on there.
I wish I would have known you 6 years ago, because she definitely struck me out.
So much. And even, I think, I was really well connected. I was, part of the Leche League. And I look back at my nursing, and at my firstborn, her weight had dropped, and I thought things were going fine. And now, knowing what I know, I was like, I should have done this. I should have reached out to a lactation consultant. I didn't do that, So I think that's part of what drives me to be involved in the world of breastfeeding, to help each other out, because really we don't know. It's your first time going through it, it's rough. It's really rough.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I really do wish I would have known you.
and 8 months is awesome. I mean, think of all of the amazing love and benefits that she got from you. So that's great. Congratulations.
Well, thanks.
We like to. Well, did you have any more questions?
I don't have any more questions.
I was gonna say that we like, when we have our guests, we like to end on a positive note. So, is there any sort of words of positivity or encouragement that you would like to share with the viewers?
Sure. I think that, breastfeeding has been a huge topic that I knew nothing about before I had children. Mm-hmm. And one thing that that I undervalued until, fast forward 10 years now, is how much breastfeeding taught me how to be a mom. Because the focus is on paying attention to your child and learning from them and following their cues, really, and trusting yourself as a mother. All of our instincts, they really are there. We just have to trust ourselves and really kind of tune in to them. And so I think that was really a great gift, that it seems kind of like fluffy or, not hard science. Like I could sit here and list the benefits and, the wonderful things about breast milk and blah, blah, blah. But that's a really big thing, to be comfortable in your body, to be comfortable as a mother, to be comfortable with your baby. That's something that I had no clue that I would learn through breastfeeding. And that's, of course, not to say that mothers who formula feed, don't get that. Of course, they have their own journey. I just feel like it was almost like a cheat sheet for me, because I was thrown into it like a little more. You're forced to be with that baby longer. formula fed babies do tend to sleep longer stretches because formula is harder to digest. And so with that breastfeeding baby, you're up around the clock. And it just kind of trial by fire situation where you're right there with that baby. So I really appreciate that. And, wherever you are in your breastfeeding journey, if you feel like you would want to reach out to a leader, you're not sure what to do, you feel free to call. The Texas La Leche League number is 1-806-680-6455. That's a warm line, and it's staffed by volunteers. So give us, about a day to get back to you. But there are chapters all over the US. And so all over the world, really. So wherever you're listening or watching, there's somebody there that would love to help you that probably had a very hard breastfeeding journey themselves. My firstborn had a cardiac defect. So breastfeeding through the NICU stays and all of the testing and the doctor's visits, it was not easy. And I don't think I would have been able to do it without the support and the help that I received. And so, we're just happy to help. If you're a La Leche League leader, you probably went through a rough time at some point, and you're just happy to be able to be there for those families that are going through it now.
Well, I'm glad that you all are here too, because that's what always makes it best is when people have already been through things so they can help people that are now dealing with it or will deal with it in the future. And you already have that experience to be able to reference these things and be like, I know exactly what's going on or what you should do. So I'm glad that y'all are here.
Yeah, it's a great organization.
And thank you, Daniela, for being a leader, the Leche League leader, and for blessing us with your wisdom.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. And it's a fun little fact. Some people, when they hear La Leche League, they think it's like a Spanish speaking organization or something, but it's international, right? But the women that started the group were Caucasian women. The reason they chose that name, which La Leche means milk in Spanish, is to be sneaky about it, because breastfeeding in public was so taboo that they would never have called it the breastfeeding group or something like that. It would have been, everyone would have been turned off. So they had to kind of find a sneaky way to say it. So people were like, oh, I wonder what that is, which is kind of sad, but now also kind of funny, I guess, in a way. But for sure, it's in all cultures, all countries. This organization exists.
That's a really interesting fact, and it's also telling that they had to take that route in the past. But thank God for growth. That's all we can offer.
Absolutely.
Well, you've been wonderful.
Yes.
Well, thanks, ladies. Thanks for reaching out. And, if I can ever be of service, please feel free to reach out again.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Take care, y'all.
Right.
Too. All right. So we hope that you all enjoyed that pertinent information that Daniela provided. And be sure to share that with some of your friends, your breast friends, some new moms or lactating moms, whoever it could be beneficial to. Make sure you share that information with them.
Definitely. And also, if you feel so inclined, share out our merch as well. Get you some and share out the merch with your friends too, because BoobTube has some great merch out there to promote the community of breast health, breastfeeding. Go check us out.
Absolutely. So be sure to do that. Share, comment, subscribe, follow us at BoobTube Podcast. And be sure to stay tuned. Tune in Tuesdays and see what we have next for you. Till then,
see you next week.